All right, well, first, of course, wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you about the power of community and education and emotional support in preventing preterm birth. I've been asked by the organizers of this event to share my story, not because it's a unique story, but because it's a story that's very common and happens to women around the United States every day. At 29 weeks into my first pregnancy with my daughter, I had several very sharp, painful cramps. My belly felt tight. The cramps subsided, but I knew something just wasn't right. Of course, this happens in the middle of the night, but that's when it always happens. So, husband drove me to the labor and delivery department, where my doctors examined me and found that my cervix, indeed, at 29 weeks, had started to soften and dilate. And the doctor told me, you'll probably deliver at 36 weeks. He didn't seem concerned, and he didn't offer any measures that I could take to prolong my pregnancy. I didn't know then that a baby born at 36 weeks might not be able to breathe on its own or nurse. No one told me that her brain growth would not be complete. No one told me about the constant fear following the birth of a preemie, or about the physical, emotional, or developmental challenges that babies face. At 33 weeks into my pregnancy, as I stepped off the elevator to meet with one of my clients, I suddenly had the feeling that my daughter could just drop right out. I had been having contractions all night, but I figured they were just those Braxton Hicks contractions you hear about. I called my doctor's office, and I could tell that my stomach was, my belly was getting solid, and then soft again, and then solid, and then soft again. But this is my first pregnancy. I didn't realize that those were real deal contractions. The nurse I spoke to on the phone asked me, do you feel pressure? And I wasn't exactly sure what she meant by that, but the way I described it to her is I said, I feel like she's pushing on me, like she's right there. Sounding frightened, the nurse, Paula, always remember her name, she said, get to labor and delivery now. Indeed, I was in labor at 33 weeks along. I was having contractions 3 to 5 minutes apart. I was admitted to the hospital and given magnesium sulfate intravenously for 48 hours to stop the contractions. The mag, as they call it, made me feel like I was burning up. My skin was on fire. I was seeing double. Magnesium is horrible, but it works. You ladies know this over here, but it works. Suddenly, I had no control over my pregnancy. I was prescribed bed rest until I delivered. I had no control over my pregnancy and no control over my life. And I see this happen to women every day. When I became pregnant again, almost 3 years later, I had a motto. And that motto was, I am the boss of this pregnancy. And I learned everything I could about preventing preterm birth before I got pregnant again. And we also set aside $20,000 in savings in case I was put on bed rest with the next pregnancy too. The organization Moms Rising says that having a baby is currently a leading cause of poverty spells in this country. This is a time when income dips below what is needed for basic necessities like food and rent. My colleague, Joni Reisfeld, the founder of Better Bed Rest, calls the financial struggle women experience when on bed rest an invisible crisis. No one realizes the toll that bed rest takes on a family's financial security. Grace Morris, who is the vice president of Better Bed Rest, is here today. And thank you, Grace, for being here. Grace will be available to anyone who wants to talk to her about Better Bed Rest in that organization. Better Bed Rest has met with Senator Barbara Mikulski's office to discuss the critical importance of paid family leave and medical leave, as well as increased funding for research into high-risk pregnancy. So, with $20,000 in the bank and armed with study results from various medical journals, my husband and I decided to give our daughter a sibling. At just 5 weeks into the pregnancy, we discovered we were expecting twins, and this was a complete shock. At 13 weeks, yeah, you can tell, I'm so like, woo. But so at 13 weeks, we saw our baby boys on ultrasound, and they looked just like their older sister. That's her. And the boys looked just like her. And they were perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, the chubbiest cheeks. They were perfect. But then at 17 weeks into the pregnancy, the high-risk nurse I was seeing weekly could only find one heartbeat. I nearly passed out from shock. We had lost one of our boys in utero. And then we waited. I had already begun having occasional contractions, so we were anxious about reaching the 24-week mark in the pregnancy, which is the absolute earliest chance of viability for our remaining son. At 24 weeks and 1 day, the contractions started up again, but this time they wouldn't stop. My husband once again drove me to labor and delivery. Both of us absolutely quiet, fearing what might happen next. At the hospital, a nurse hooked me up to a monitor to time my contractions, which were now about 5 minutes apart. After a bag of IV fluids for hydration and a shot of terbutaline, the contractions calmed down. So the nurse left to prepare my discharge papers. We thought we were out of the woods. The attending physician on call that night was the same doctor who delivered my daughter, and she knew about all the challenges I had getting my daughter here safely. She recognized my name up on the board and came in to tell me that I could go home. But I knew something wasn't right. I felt different that day. Something felt different. I knew I was my baby's only voice. I requested, or you might say demanded, but politely demanded, an ultrasound. So I knew from all the research that I had done that a short cervix is one of the most accurate predictors of preterm birth. I share this fact with high-risk women often because most women don't know this. I also requested a fetal fibronectin test. The fetal fibronectin test is another excellent tool in assessing the risk of preterm birth. More than 99% of women with symptoms of preterm birth who have a negative fetal fibronectin test result will not deliver their baby within the next 14 days. And it's a huge sigh of relief. But most women don't know about this test. They don't know that it exists. They don't know to ask about it. My FFN test result was negative, thankfully. But when the doctor measured the length of my cervix by ultrasound, she said, "You're not getting out of bed. The contractions are causing your cervix to dilate and shorten. You're on bed rest until you deliver." I went from discharge papers to admitting papers like that.